بابا کے دل کے ٹکڑے تو نے گنے 72 ٹکڑے 1000 ہوں گے قاسم تیرے بدن کے پیکان برس رہے ہیں تابوت پر حسن کے زینب پکاری بھائی دل ڈوبتا ہے میرا زینب پکاری بھائی دل ڈوبتا ہے میرا اگلو نہ دل کے ٹکڑے صدقے گئیں بہن یہ پیکان برس رہے ہیں تابوت پر حسن کے زینب ہے بال کھولے امت ہے تیر تولے زینب ہے بال کھولے امت ہے تیر تولے پوچھو نہ شام کی جب یہ حال ہے وطن کے پیکان برس رہے ہیں تابوت پر حسن کے محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
Awesome. Thank you, brother Muhammad Hassan, for reciting Quran and poetry. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for starting on time. Inshallah, we are right on time, inshallah, for Sheikh's Majlis. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, just a brief introduction to Sheikh Mekki. Obviously, thank you for accepting the invitation to come here for these few days. Sheikh Mekki comes to us from Colorado, where he is these days, but is originally from Philadelphia. And he has his master's from the Islamic College of Advanced Sciences, as well as has spent time in Hawza for about 10 years. So again, thank you for your time here. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, Sheikh Mekki was talking about the influence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how he had an impact. And examples of how he had an impact here in society in America, but specifically through the lens and the experiences of his mother, Sister Aisha Mekki. And yesterday, I know we only covered the intellectual level, but inshallah today we're going to explore some of the other ones. So inshallah, without further ado, I will invite Sheikh Mekki to the minbar with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
It's easier if I sit down here. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد والثناء لرب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا. So today I want to look at the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what I like to call a sort of walking testimony to what he believed, what he preached, what Islam is, but specifically as a case study in Islam in America. Looking at my parents as a case study of people who came to Shia Islam, who came from a background of not being Muslim. What was their journey like? There's a lot of lessons, I believe, that we can all learn for how to build Islam in America. What is community? What is community? You know, it's a broad concept, a central, important Islamic concept, extremely valued, right? We give value to Jama'at prayer. Right? We give value to Friday prayer because of the congregating, where people come together. Oftentimes, in a lot of Muslim lands, there's only one place for Friday prayer, so that it causes people that even if you have your local masjid that you may go to, you come together at certain periods of time. It promotes the brotherhood. Right? It promotes the brotherhood. I was talking about kind of looking at a couple different aspects, looking at Islam and the teachings of Rasulullah as it embodies our intellect, our heart, and our spirit, and giving some subtle distinction between these. And yesterday, I was beginning from the intellect approach. I'm talking about how, for my parents, and for many people, using them again as a case study and reference, and representing the experiences of so many like them as well. But the fact that Islam made sense and was logical was an easy connection to Islam, right? And the idea of justice was very central to this. And so Islam offered justice and solutions, whereas in society there was a completely devoid of this in so many different ways and for so many different people. Community is one of the solutions to the problems of society. It's a mechanism to navigate society, right? So many of us have felt the brunt of the impact of many people being isolated for the past few years. Well, I want you to think about not just the impact that happens or has happened through isolations or some of the effects of this, but let's also think about how powerful it is to have connection to others. How meaningful that is. Many people dealt with loneliness during this time. Dealt with distance or different things like that, not feeling maybe less of having a place to stay in or connect to. It's a difficult time for everyone. What I want you to consider is that for many people, that's their consistent reality. The reality of loneliness or isolation may be someone's consistent reality. Right? Not something that by virtue of some circumstance has become this way. You know, I talk a lot about this because I think that this aspect of brotherhood and sisterhood in Islam was paramount for my parents. The concept of brotherhood and sisterhood. Because what it means is that there is a unique bond that exists only amongst those who are believers. It is a spiritual bond. We have sometimes bonds with people by blood, by other ways that we're connected. But there is no stronger bond than this spiritual bond. It can bring together two people who have nothing else in common. It can bring together a world with major differences. It's an absolute unifier. So this idea of a community that is an asset to your self-development because of the brotherhood that exists, because of the safety that you are a part of, because of the consistency of those relationships. This was very meaningful. We live in a society that really focuses on individualism, really focuses on self-centered, egotistical, very selfish tendencies, promotes these as, champions them as freedoms and such. But actually, these are things which you have to look at totally differently when you're dealing with other people if you want to community build, if you want to build something greater. So what is community? A lot of times we think community is somewhere on the map. It is not. It's not a physical location. Community is in the hearts of the mu'mineen. Community is in the reality of the trust and love and the brotherhood of the believers. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. The believers are brethren. They're brothers of one another. They're brethren. How much can you rely on your brother? Right? It should be a close relationship. This brotherhood signifies that. Sisterhood signifies this. It's so important that one of my teachers explained this very subtle but very important point. In marriage, between a husband and wife, even though there are a lot of different things that are recommendations for relationship and so on and so forth, it is still important that even in that context, that a form of ukhuwah exists. This trust, the reliability has to be in that place as well. And there's many components that can signify that we've arrived at this place. But you can be in a relationship with someone and there be the absence of brotherhood, or not be deep brotherhood. And there can be levels to that as well. But when you are coming from, as my parents, in society, and you're trying to navigate to be successful, right? As an African American, you still have the problems of an African American even after you become Muslim. Right? So it's not necessarily the experiences of people, even for people who are converts, are maybe very different. Right? And these are realities because of the nature and how this country is made up. Sometimes it will be hard to understand these things if we don't understand the history of this country. We don't understand the roots of America. But these bonds which connect us allow us to do great things. Certain things can only be done by groups. It's not an individual thing. It's not a one-person thing. I want you to think about something. Who is the most complete human being alive today? Imam al-Mahdi. Ajalallahu ta'ala faraj mashallah. the most perfect human being alive on our planet for the guidance of humanity. We believe in his return. We believe in the return of Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, Jesus, and we believe together that they restored justice throughout the world. The bonds of brotherhood are what enable that magnitude of an event to take place. If the problems of the world could be solved by one person alone, I guarantee you Imam Mahdi would have changed everything immediately already. It is a necessity. It is a necessity for us to be prepared, to be in a position to aid our Imam. Because this is a group work. This is something that requires the magnitude of the entire Muslim Ummah to do together. It requires that level of muscle. It's not a group, it's not a one organization, it's not one group of people, it's not one center. It will require a collective to come together. But not come together physically, that's not what we're talking about. It's not a physical place, and it's not about physically moving to another place or being physically in the same place. It's about our hearts being together. This is what is brotherhood. This is the ikhwa that Islam speaks of. The Muhajirin and Ansar. This is the kind of path of what the Prophet chooses to bring people together. So think the black stone. Think about ways where Rasulullah ﷺ was strategic in unifying people. This was paramount for my parents because what it meant was that Islam is a community. Inherently, by me becoming Muslim, I have now become a part of this community, in theory. And just talking about this with talking about this earlier today, about how sometimes the experience of the theoretical ideas of Islam don't always translate into our personal experiences. Right? Unfortunately, always Islam and Muslim are not synonymous. And we have ideas and concepts in Islam that may not always translate to the person who considers himself a Muslim. It means that I have work to do. Right? It means that I may have room to improve. One of the things that my mother saw as a solution is education, as a way to create a better future, more brotherhood and sisterhood down the line. We create better mu'mins, we create more believers who understand and who are educated well in this religion, in this way of life. And so that became her emphasis as she started a co-op. And with other parents, they got together, they began a school. So some people you may or may not know this, but I have been homeschooled for maybe the better part of my education. And maybe from third or fourth grade onward, a couple of days my mother was the teacher for this co-op, a couple of days my dad, my aunt, my older sister, and they would take turns in designating days for the group of us that were the students there. And we had an area designated in our house in West Philadelphia that my mom would use. This was the library in our house, and it was also the classroom, and where all this stuff, most of this would take place. This was an opportunity where I first began probably a lot of my understanding of Islam. Through this, it was called Imam Ja'far Academy. Right, IJA. And even though it started very small, it was significant in terms of what it gave to us, the agency that it gave to us. Make no mistake, homeschooling is a chore, especially for those people who are involved if you don't have a lot of help and support to offset things and to balance things out. But the opportunities that were given to us, as a young person, we participated in many conferences. We traveled abroad. I went to by virtue of this approach to education, it allowed me an opportunity at 13 and 14 to be able to go to the Hausa, to be able to study. I was still in high school when I was studying in the Hausa. I was getting a degree before I got my diploma. This school system, as someone who's doing his PhD in education, I urge you to not over-invest in the 12-year school system that is similar to what exists in the American school system, is my point. There is so much more and better, but we have to be able to think outside of the box. We have to be able to think about what is the need of our children and youth, not just what exists so that I can reproduce another model of that. We work from a frame of reference. Oftentimes our frames of reference may be models which are non-working or not very successful, or if there are some that are, we have to focus on those and take, what we need from that. This co-op approach was one which allowed us to opt out of a lot of the things and the miseducation that's happening or was happening in the public school system. My mother was a public school teacher for all of her life, for most of her life, for many years. And she felt that we need to opt away from this system because of how detrimental it is. Right. Now, this means that we have to understand what is our reality, what do we need to do, what is our job, where are we trying to go as Muslims. This is the kind of task that you can't do alone. Hence, going back to the brotherhood and sisterhood and the ikhwa that's necessary to be able to do those kind of level of tasks. Right? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My mom used to work at a masjid. At one time, she was involved in the school and the education portion of things there. And she got fired because she was really outspoken about, hey, what are you doing? There's no kids in this place. You got a masjid with no kids? What is wrong with you? What are you doing? Scrap this. We need to focus on the people who are going to be here tomorrow. And we need to rethink what we're doing. Don't have programs for adults, but simply focus on and prioritize like you understand this system. Like you understand what's going to happen to a child that has to go up against battle after battle and test after test every day in public school. Right? These are realities. Now, in order to do this kind of level of group work, which takes so much tolerance, patience, right? It takes being amicable, right? It takes being able to work with people, right? It takes sometimes compromise, and it takes the removal of ego, because it's an obstacle to do this kind of work. When you're trying to work with a variety of people, there's a beautiful hadith from Imam Jawad, peace be upon him, where he talks about, when mu'mineen meet with one another, what happens. He says those meetings are talqihul aql, an impregnation of the intellect. When you meet with your Muslim brothers and sisters, especially as we have all unique positions in the world as representatives of Islam, when you meet with these representatives, it is exactly that. You're meeting with someone else who is at the front lines of solutions in this world, right? Or who should be. If we are not, then that's an internal thing that we have to correct. What is our purpose? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? What is our goal? Right. So, in understanding that in doing this critically important, there's some things you can't do alone. There's a group of, someone got stuck under a car, and there was a group of students somewhere in Sacramento, the baseball team, and they were able to lift up a car. team came together, we're going to save somebody, we lift the car. Yeah, you can lift the car. Right? Why? Because you have strength, and there's strength in numbers, but not numbers alone. And that is what Islam brings to the table. So there's this idea of not just quantifying, but qualifying our organizations and our situations. Right? Not just the numbers, obviously, but the quality of what we're presenting. That's the care component. So I'll give you an example. There's so many things that are different in the expressions, right? For example, often art is like this. If everybody draws the same thing, there will be different expressions, different looks, different ways how we interpret or understood or felt comfortable, or different inclinations, right? This is important to understand, that even as we all look at the same thing, we may see and understand sometimes in some degree we may something slightly different. It's interesting. In one of the du'as, it talks about how Allah, it mentions that Allah made the months and the years, and He made people to see them similarly. It talked about basically like how days and nights and the solar system basically is working, that Allah caused people to see them the same. Meaning that even though all over the world that there's different people, different places, different time zone, different things, there's still a same understanding of the world for the most part, scientifically. Right? This is important. I'm giving you some groundwork because there's an important point that I want to make in a couple steps to get there, inshallah. So I want to translate this to how we deal with people, and I think that sometimes there is a secular approach to how we deal with things at our community spaces. What do I mean by a secular approach? Okay. What I mean by that, for example, is I have seen this where someone had a specific, very specific understanding of what Arba'in was or what Ashura was and what it should look like. Okay? Why do I call this secular? Because it's so specific that everything else kind of non-things or don't even have a place there. Other ideas, other ways to do that, it's almost like it doesn't have a place there. It's so specific and only has to be this one way in this one place. This is another aspect. And it can't translate to other places. What do I mean? I mean seeing Islam only for specific to Ashura, specific to Muharram, specific to the nights of Qad, and not being able to see Islam on Monday. Not being able to see Islam, seeing Islam in the masjid, but not being able to see Islam in when I go to the grocery store, when I'm shopping, when I'm walking down the street, my etiquette, when I'm dealing with non-mahram at the bank, whatever it is. If my view becomes so secular, I'm considering this to be secular, where I'm looking at such a specific interpretation of how Islam must be practiced, that even other things than this I don't include. And then also in other spaces this may not translate. So that concept and idea I have of Imam Hussein may be limited specific to a time and date on the calendar. And it may not translate to other times. But also, I'm not tolerant of other expressions of the love of Imam Hussein, for example. You see it? This is what I'm saying when I'm saying like a kind of secular. How does this play out? A multicultural community, right? Like this one or other, many of them. One of the things I used to always really champion about this community and share whenever I would go and travel other places was that they would, when they did the Nohas and Matam the Latmiyat, that they would put the translations on the screen so that other people could be able to participate. Right? So that you'd be able to share. Okay? So this is where it's not about the just the communication of it existing. It's about the care in that communication. Because there's a baseline, right? This is basic things, wajib, whatever Islam says. Beyond that, we have our recommendations. This is better to do. This is good etiquette, right? Beyond that, we have all of our preferences, the cultural nuances, and the varying expressions. But big secret, we think these are the divine recommendations. We've misplaced things. So what happens? Because I see this level of my personal understanding and practice of what this expression of Azaa of Imam Hussein looks like, because of that, I can't see beyond that. I'm so focused on that, when I look and see something slightly different, I'm appalled. I'm appalled. I'm not appreciative. I'm more appalled, taken aback. What is this kind of Azaa that happened? And again, remember, we're starting from the baseline of, we're not even going into things that are unlawful. There's a plethora of things that are not permissible. We're not even talking about those things. If our Maraja have said that this is not allowed, that's not in the conversation. Beyond that, there are recommendations and things that you're encouraged to do, right? After Salat, there's recommendations. For example, specific way that you say your salam. If you want to say salam to the imams at Ahlul Bayt, there's some recommendations in Mafatis. This is what you say. This is a recommended way to say. A lot of times we may say, but we may not say in this recommended way. We say in a way that we want to say. We're comfortable. What happens over time? This kind of nuanced way that came into existence, not necessarily a bad thing, or a problematic thing. It's not necessarily in contradiction with Islam or anything like that. But however, if I begin to understand that now this is the divine recommendation, or I take it up a notch and I believe that this is wajib, then we're going to have a problem. This is when people say things like, oh my goodness, we had an alam over there and you didn't have wudu when you touched it. Is that a recommendation from our Ahlul Bayt, or is it a cultural nuance? We have to understand or decide. It's one of the two. If it is indeed something that's divinely recommended, we should put something on the wall and put a hadith and express and encourage. If it's something that's only at the level of cultural, should it be abandoned? Should it be encouraged? I just want you to hold that thought for a minute. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this is where there has to be some intellectual understanding and maturity. How we deal with people is a part of our intellectual understanding and maturity. Because we understand that as a single human being, there's limit to what I can accomplish. As a community, as a fist, I can do much. Because I value this, then this is a part of how I approach all of these things. It means that I'm tolerant of these varying expressions because they are, one, they're not contradicting Islam. They're not unlawful. So then I have to be tolerant of them. Hey, I'll take it another step forward to even further, make the point. You can go to the same place or the same country, for example, and find various interpretations there. You can come in America, you find different accents. My dad was from down south. He's from South Carolina. He had a southern accent. Right? He said things in southern ways. Right? And different dialects and tones. This may affect the expression of the words, the conversation, so on and so forth. In Azaa and mourning, it's going to be similar to this. The expressions may vary. You go to, within, having lived in Iran for so many years, within Iran, you go to different places. If you go down, some places in the areas in the south, how people beat their chests is so different than an area somewhere else. So there has to be some room for cultural expression to be a part of religion. This is very important. But what is going to happen if that cultural expression in one case is in opposition with someone else's cultural expression? It's okay here, but if it's offensive to this person. But it's okay to me, but it's offensive to you, or vice versa, or something. Right? So here comes where the aql fits in. Where's the intellectual maturity? How I navigate this space. You know, my mother believed that this was deep in Islam, and it was embedded in the concepts of brotherhood and sisterhood, which removed all the ego and the malice from society and communities. It's a way for us to be able to do the work. Right? There's not a way forward without a group. There's not an army that's a one person. Oh, that's right. So then we have to find ways that if we understand our plight or our situation, or if we have a purpose. What is your purpose? What are we doing? Why are you here? What is your purpose? I'm talking about in respect to Islam in America. What is your purpose? We have to have some idea, understanding. Anything that involves sharing the message of Islam in America is going to be most effective doing it as a unit, doing it in solidarity, right? How beneficial is it for Muslims when there are laws or rules or acceptance socially in society? Alhamdulillah, we like that. We're happy for that. We think that we're more comfortable in society. Well, we don't have to wait for that to happen. Guess what? We can push that forward if we're forward thinking. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, for example, it's always a challenge, and a lot of work goes into supporting programs and events. A lot of effort, hard work goes on behind the scenes that we know, sometimes we don't know. It's important to understand that with all the things that go into supporting successful programming and things like that, the patience, the tolerance that is a prerequisite to ukhuwah is what will make those things possible. There's not even a possibility without us embracing the concept of ukhuwah and this concept of brotherhood. If my mother alone wanted to homeschool, it's a challenge. You're by yourself. As a unit, as a group, you're able to do so much more, right? So one of the things that has, I will say, changed or moved forward is that on one level, on the level of a language, some things have changed a lot in terms of how our communities look and how they operate. But I'm not simply talking about changing things on a surface, I'm talking about changing things deeply, and so this requires care. My mom used to love this quote, they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Understanding that all of knowledge and these kind of things, the Prophet Muhammad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he gave him knowledge from everything from Adam until the end of time. All of knowledge. And with all of this knowledge, Rasulullah could have done so many things. Right? This is just something to think about, to contemplate on, to reflect on. Moving forward a little bit. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So in that example of going to that next level, being patient and tolerant with different varying expressions, this is one of the ways that we can actually be intentional about. I call it, for example, a cultural exchange. Right? Sometimes there's a need to be very intentional about explaining what is and how things are. Because they are different, and if you're trying to work together, especially in a multicultural setting, then we have to understand these things right? We have to remove this operating from a place of assuming that everyone knows, assuming that, you know, people understand. Have a platform where we share and we break things down. Right? Someone comes and explains it. You know what? In Afghan culture, this thing, we call it mantu. This is how you make it. This is what this food looks like. And give some context, some expression. It helps me to understand. It helps the next person to appreciate. You know, one sister was in tears because the anoha that was being recited that she always heard but didn't understand. The brother took a few moments in the beginning and kind of gave a melodic explanation that was beautiful. And it resonated with her. And she said, please tell that person that I've heard this so many times and I didn't understand. Sometimes we're in physical spaces, we don't understand what's happening. We may not understand the words of the language, we may not understand the expression or the interpretation, why this is different. We shouldn't necessarily be taken aback. This is a part of the beauty of Islam. This is the beautiful manifestation of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that divine, majestic beauty. We are all just a little dot of that reflection. And the more you get close to another piece of reflection, the more light you have. You only get light this way. There's a certain light that you can't get any other way except through the brotherhood, except through other mu'mineen. Which is why Islam is so heavy and central around the concepts of unity, the concepts which are the prerequisites to unity, like patience, like education, understanding. It's that spiritual self-development. One of the biggest dangers I always call out to the, actually I think that point will stay for tomorrow, inshallah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I want to give another example just to make the point. You take someone who's a family man. You have certain obligations, certain things that you need to do, right? You need to provide for your family, food, clothing, shelter, try to elevate their status of living if you can. Certain obligations that you have. Then there's certain things which are a part of the next level, doing a little bit more. Right? The mustahabat, the recommendations and such, very encouraged, especially in the family life. That's a part of the community building. So one level, for example, is when these things are happening, to show gratitude. I could say, thank you, right? Someone's working hard, I could say, verbally express gratitude. But there's a deeper level, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying care, context and care, right? So it's not just about, for example, I'm tolerant of different majlis. I care, and I go to a length to understand, to connect, to get to know different people, to understand their culture. This is deep, right? This is real, right? It's not just on the surface, people from different places, languages, in a physical setting, but still isolated from each other from the sense of brotherhood and spiritual bonds, right? It's not what we're talking about. So this deeper level, I like to use another example. Anyone who's ever seen or witnessed how hard of a work, how much goes into being a mother, would understand it's one of the hardest jobs in the universe, by far. I remember Ayatollah Jawadi Amali explaining, I believe it was him, I don't want to misquote, but one of the ulama was talking about motherhood, juxtaposed prophethood, the gravity of what that means for the success of a human being. After getting to the kind of the end of my academic education journey, now where I'm about to start my thesis, I thought to myself, early childhood education would have been maybe more significant because it can reach the roots of the problem, to circumvent things that maybe would happen problems later. It's such a big deal. The nurture that happens early. Well, this is the mothers. Right? It's so much goes into this. So there's a deep level of care, not just verbalization, right? Mothers are not just words. It's the care that makes that special. The depth of nurture. Read Imam Sajjad alayhi salam's description as he talks about, you know. So, a way to understand this is, again, gratitude. On the surface, I can say thank you, I can do an act of kindness, or things like this. And that on one level is an expression, but if I want to add a depth through it and care, it's much more meaningful. And I'm going to give you an example to kind of work with. I remember one of our ulama, Sheikh Osama, he was talking about the importance of our wives having time, our sisters having time where they are not obligated to be mothers or wives, where they're not having an obligation at the time. They're completely free. And this idea resonated with a lot of people. And it made sense, especially when you consider all that goes into what is required to be a mother. So saying, you know, thank you, I appreciate this is one way to do this. And another example that came out of our discussion was like this. You say, these husbands should say to their wives, very seriously, sit them down and tell them that, you know what, I don't want to see you lift another finger for the next couple of hours. If you do, you're going to be in trouble. You need to go relax and do this spa stuff for the next couple of hours. You need to have your own time for things. What is this? This is the same thank you, but it's with deep care and consideration. Right? It's not just the verbal. So just the verbal, I don't consider that the ukhuwat that we're talking about. Right? There has to be something much more than just than this kind of sort of lip service that it could become. We have this potential to be able to give, to utilize brotherhood and sisterhood to make our community successful, to make our own personal lives more successful. Right? This creates trust, this creates love, it creates enthusiasm. I'm not just saying something, I'm being considerate of how and care in how I'm saying it. Let me give you an example. Let me know if you need anything. It's good on the surface, it expresses things, but how many times have you told somebody you needed something when they said, let me know if you need something? Some people it may be very easy. Some people it may be challenging. Maybe they're a dignified person that doesn't like to seek help. You asking them, do you need anything, doesn't mean anything. It's not really helpful. If I know this person is in need, is it more helpful to me to ask, hey, let me know, or is this just to offer? To Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein, with the hadith is from one of them, alayhim as-salam, talks about letting a person be dignified in their ask because they've already had to lower themselves to ask for something or help or support, that don't degrade them further. Right? So it's the kind of idea where we want to get ahead of that and take an approach which it shows the true consideration and care. That is what the ukhuwat is. This is the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This love and brotherhood that was a concept for my mother, and she learned what Islam preached about this. How Imam Ali alayhi salam, my father had a book he would read all the time about Imam Ali. And this brotherhood that existed was very important for them and central to, yes, Islam is a solution because it has a support system inherently through the spiritual bond of Islam. It's very powerful. But for some people, you know, there was a Sunni imam, I believe he was African American, and he talked about how he found Islam, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I found Islam first, but then I met Muslims. And I was glad that I found Islam before I met Muslims. Why is that? It should be the other way around. You meet the Muslims and you're like, I want to know more about what is this that you have. But there were experiences where some of these understandings of Islam were very different from what Islam really was. I heard a teacher talking about when the Imam comes, people thinking that there's a new religion, just from being distant maybe in some of their forms of practice. Right? Shaheed Mutahari kills it. He touches on this so good, so well. For example, when he goes into the misrepresentations of Ashura and Karbala, something so important becoming misrepresented. Inshallah, we can all look at this example and learn from it. The teachings of Rasulullah are uswatun hasana for all of us, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صلى الله على محمد وعلى آله.
Ya Hussein, 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 Hussein.
Vaveyla, 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 vaveyla.